Hello everyone. Welcome to the second lecture of the age of industrialization. In the previous lecture, we have learnt about before industrial revolution along with its two subcontents coming up of factory and the pace of industrial change. Today, we will be learning about hand labor and the steam power with its subtitle Life of Workers. We will also be exploring industrialization in colonies. Let's start. What do we need to know about the hand labor and the steam power? Children, whenever we have anything in abundance, we normally take it for granted, and the same is getting reflected here under the title Hand Labor and Steam Power. In Victorian Britain, there was no shortage of human labor. That means human labor was available in abundance. Therefore, industrialists did not want to introduce machines which required large capital investment. Ultimately, laborers were available at low wages, wherein these machines would have called up for high costing and high investment to be done in by these industrialists. So they opt for not introducing any such sort of machines against the human labor. Many seasonal industries were also there who usually preferred only hand labor. That means, though their work could have been done easily by the machines, but then again, costing investment was a concern. So these people have opted for having hand labor for seasonal jobs too. Handmade goods came to symbolize refinement and the class, which is very true as and when even we move into the markets and check out for handmade stuff, though they are little expensive, but they symbolize their own quality, refinement, class, standard, which we normally struggle hard to get in for. So when we talk about labor being available in abundance, hand labor being demanded every now and then by these industrialists, we must know about the life of workers during that period. There was large-scale migration from countryside to cities in search of jobs. Finding a job depended on existing network of friendship and keen relations. So when people have been moving to the countryside, it was must for them to have a social connection, a connection that was either connected to the industrialists through their relatives or through their friends. If a person was not having any such sort of social connection, he or she then had to suffer a lot for getting in the job. People without existing social connection in the cities found it difficult to find a job. Many people had to wait for long periods before they could get a job. Such people often had to spend nights on bridges or in night shelters. Some private individuals set up night refuges. The poor law authorities maintained casual wards for such people. Now, labor was available in abundance. People have been checking out for jobs every now and then, and they all have moved to countryside. Ultimately, countryside had to have some or the other place where these laborers would have gotten sort of shelter. So there were common wards, common halls that were then being arranged in for these laborers. Many jobs were seasonal in nature. Once a busy season was over, the poor were once again on the streets. Ultimately, when we talk about seasonal jobs are for a specific tenure in a year. When the job gets over, the labor is either made free to go back to his or her place, or the labor is all vacant again to struggle hard to earn his basic source of livelihood. While some people returned to their countryside, many stayed back to look for some odd job. So children, it's the seasonal job which is then being highlighted over here, where we have seen and studied that seasonal job has made people struggle hard to have their basic source of livelihood, as they had to work during those typical months of the work being demanded for, and later in the post sessions they had to struggle hard for an alternate source of income. Now if we proceed ahead, we do have got some interesting facts and things to know about, where you will get to know that these laborers were then being attracted back to their work their work was gradually started getting replaced with different machines and technologies, and how did these people go up for having a revolt against the same? There was some increase in the wages in the early 19th century. It is difficult to arrive at figures from various trades and fluctuations which happened from year to year. The period of employment was also critical in determining the quality of life of a worker. During the best of the times, till the mid 19th century, about 10% of urban population was extremely poor. During the periods of economic slump, the unemployment increased anything between 35 to 75%. Imagine an economy having almost around 35 to 75% of its population completely unemployed. Won't it be tragic for the economy to even imagine up for such situation? Workers often turned hostile to new technology because, of course, they were in fear of unemployment. For example, when the spinning jenny was introduced, women began to attack the new machines because they survived on hand spinning. After 1840s, construction activities increased in the cities. This opened greater employment opportunities. The number of workers in the transport industries doubled in 1840s, wherein it doubled again in the subsequent 30 years. Now these were different sources of how these laborers could get engaged with to have another source of livelihood. So we have then talked about transportation, construction, which has then been introduced over here, where workers have gotten more of attraction further to proceed ahead for. So in short, hand labor, steam powers, life of worker briefly tells us about laborers were available in abundance in Victorian Britain, which then has somehow shown the mindset of the industrialists that these industrialists were not willing to introduce machines to replace the hand labor. Ultimately, we do know the reason, because it was going to cost for high investments again with the machines. After the busy season was over, the workers became jobless. Now this is about workers who were then being employed in the seasonal jobs. In the early 19th century, wages increased, but the prices of goods also increased. We do know that almost around 10% of increment was seen in the early 19th century with the wages of the laborers. But we do know that even the goods, products and services which were to be used in by these laborers on daily basis for their basic source of livelihood also have gotten an increment. This was all about today's first part to be studied for. Let's now proceed ahead with industrialization in colonies. So children, colonies is a term which is much more familiar to us. When we talk about a colony in historic form, a colony means a country, rather a weak country which is then being controlled by a strong country. Weak as in the form of economically, politically weak country, wherein this economically and politically weak country gets controlled over by a strong economy. Like if I talk about India, India was being overruled and powered by England, where these Britishers have come into India initially just as in with the interest of setting up East India Company for trading purpose, but gradually they have acquired and control over our nation. So industrialization took place even in colonies which were then being controlled by economically stronger nations. So how colonies have had the picture of industrialization that we are going to study, and in this we do have gotten the very first topic, that is of the age of Indian textile. Now when I talk about Indian textile, we are well aware of the fact that during the ancient era, the finest quality of raw cotton and silk was exported from India to England. So we do have to know much more about it. Let's start with the age of Indian textile. Before the age of machine industries, silk and cotton goods from India dominated the international market in textile. A vibrant sea trade operated through the main pre-colonial ports. Now, let's see in detail what this age of Indian textile is all about. The East India Company had consolidated its business by the mid 19th century. The early centers of trade, like Surat and Hooghly, declined during this period. The new centers, like Calcutta and Bombay, emerged. Once the East India Company established political power, it began to assert its monopoly right to trade. Now, monopoly is one's own rule over the market. So, East India Company has then established its own monopoly for the right to trade, even in our own nation. The company tried to eliminate the existing traders and brokers who were connected with the cloth trade. It tried to establish a more direct control on the weavers. A paid servant called Gumastha was appointed to supervise weavers, collect supplies, and examine the quality of cloth. Now, Gomasthas is already a known term to each one of us, where in short, if I talk about Gomastha was none other than a person who was supposed to supervise these traders. But this Gomastha, the supervisor, was then being appointed by the East India Company. The company prevented weavers from dealing with other buyers. This was done through the system of advances. Under this system, the weavers were given loans to purchase raw materials. Once a weaver took the advance, he could not sell his produce to any other traders. The new system of advances created many problems for the weavers. Earlier, they used to grow some crops on their land, which took care of their family needs. But now, as they took advances from the East India Company and they were forced to work for the company, they could not focus on the cultivation. As they had no time for cultivation, they had to lease out their land. Unlike the traditional merchants, the Gomastha was an outsider who had no social link with the villages. We have already seen that the Gomastha was a paid servant who was appointed by the East India Company to supervise the work of these weavers. He used to visit with sepoys and peons and punish weavers who could not meet the deadline. The Gomasthas behaved arrogantly. There were reports of clashes between the weavers and the Gomasthas in many villages. The system of advances resulted in many weavers falling in debt trap. Now, debt trap is a situation where the weaver or a person who is not able to pay back the loan that he or she has taken. In many places, that is in Carnatic and Bengal, weavers deserted villages and migrated to other villages to set up looms. Many weavers began to refuse loans and closed down their workshops and took to farming. So this was all about the age of Indian textile, where we have not just studied about the importance of the raw cotton and the silk that was being exported from India to the international market, or India rolling out the international market with its finest quality of these raw materials, but we have also seen how these weavers been exploited. In short, if you have to remember what has actually happened to weaver, just read this out. Hope you have enjoyed reading out the struggles of Indian weavers and knowing about what their hardships have been throughout this journey of age of industrialization. We will be exploring the last part of this particular section, that is Manchester comes to India, in the next lecture along with the last topic. Thank you.